research project that involved 1,200 Downtown Eastside residents in the last little while, so it'll take about 15 minutes. We're also, just to let you know, the Carnegie Action Project is a project of Carnegie Association, so it's an association of residents that have about 6,000 members. So power to the associations. So we're hoping that you'll help us reverse the global trend that's gentrifying the inner city neighborhoods. And we want an Aboriginal and low-income Downtown Eastside neighborhood. We're already make up 70% of the population in this neighborhood, and we want to keep our numbers the same. And we're legitimate, and we're a real community, as you've heard. So I wanted to tell you about what's happening. Jean's got some reports there she can give you. Displacement is actually happening in the Downtown Eastside. 700 people are homeless in the Downtown Eastside, and 3,600 people are living in the crappiest housing in Canada, the SROs. 2 years in a row, CAP measured the rent increases in the hotel rooms. The rents are creeping up. We found about 1,500 rooms. Half of the remaining privately owned hotel rooms in the area are already lost to rent increases beyond what low-income people can afford. And half of those rooms that are lost were lost just in the last year. The city's not monitoring this change, and it has no mechanisms to stop it. So we need the province to bring in effective rent controls to stop this process, which is causing more homelessness. So we want the hotels replaced also with subsidized housing, and the city has agreed that this is what needs to happen, but at the rate that they're taking, it'll take 53 years to replace the hotels in the Downtown Eastside. So we want to know if you would help us replace those hotel rooms in a more speedier fashion. So we should have 500 new homes a year in the Downtown Eastside instead of 100, and that way we'll have our hotels replaced within 10 years and not 53 years. So social exclusion is also happening in the Downtown Eastside. Condo construction is outpacing social housing at a rate of 3 to 1. Last year, the Director of Housing at the City of Vancouver called it a hurricane of development, and we need to build social housing to protect people from this impact. So we have downtown areas in our neighborhood that are completely dysfunctional, and I'm talking about Gastown as an example. 70% of the Gastown residents are living below the low-income cutoff line, but they're not welcome in the stores. They're herded off the streets by private security guards to move up into this area, and they have no voice at all in decision makings at the tables there. And it's socially tense in Gastown. Property owners are trying to stop more social housing, so they're starting to organize, and business owners, and they're worried about the open drug market, which we believe is a separate issue from the housing problem. Social housing has nothing to do with the drug market. Social housing is the solution, and it's not the problem. So just wanted to emphasize again that the Downtown Eastside is a strong Aboriginal and low-income community. And we've talked to 1,250 people so far to work on a vision for the neighborhood and some principles for developing it, and kind of coming to agreement on what our values are and what are the good things we have happening for us now. So we want to tell you about what those good things are, because we think it'll help you understand why it's important to keep this community, keep the best parts of this community. So what's good about the Downtown Eastside? We did something called community mapping recently, and we learned how to do this from a professor at UBC who's from the country of Columbia, and she goes to Columbia, and she taught it to us, and it was like, oh, this is a beautiful gift she gave us to be able to learn how to do this. We were so excited. So what we did is we asked people to draw their most meaningful places on blank pieces of paper, and creating a map, a group map. So this is, it's not a very good picture, you can't see it too well, but it's the seniors downstairs in the Carnegie Center, so the Chinese and Aboriginal seniors. So we mapped the good things, and we asked people to tell us why in detail, so we got all that rich detail. We also mapped bad things on a separate map, and we kept going around the table until we ended up with these amazing maps. We took extensive notes, and then we pulled out the themes and looked for the commonalities in what everybody said. We did one at Jude's building, we did various, different places. So who mapped? We went to 23 different groups. We talked to 200 people in total just for this little segment. We went to a hotel, a daycare, some co-ops, social housing projects. We even had translation at the Chinese seniors one. The average length of the time that people that were a part of the mapping was that they'd lived in the neighborhood was 17 years. So it's quite a lot of rich experience. And the results, we think, counter the stereotypes that the media have about the Downtown Eastside. So here's some of the assets. This is the group at Pace, one of the groups at Pace. So we have a lot of acceptance, and we have a strong sense of community, and you heard that here today. That came up again and again. People mapped those places that were associated with that strong sense of community and acceptance. Here's a fantastic quote from one of the mappers. And quote, "We're on no levels here, and I don't know anywhere else where that happens." And here's another quote. "The Carnegie Kitchen was my first volunteer position. It was the first time in my life that I was open and honest about my drug addiction. When I told them in the kitchen, they didn't judge me and accepted me. It was a big step towards my recovery. It's been 4 years." Another thing that we have going for us in the neighborhood is residents, they did map drug dealing as a problem on the bad maps. Hey, friend. But in their explanations, they show a lot of empathy and actually a sophisticated understanding of the roots of addiction and homelessness. So I think that's something that we have going for us. And here's a great quote from a parent in Strathcona. She says, "I'm proud of who I am and I grew up here. Watching my kids come up and their level of bias is so much lower than other kids. My son has more compassion for differences for homeless people." So that's something we have going for us. Another thing is we have a rich and authentic cultural heritage in the Downtown Eastside, with many Aboriginal people living or migrating here daily, with the historical Chinese and white poor and working poor living here in the hotels and in social housing. It's authentic because it isn't about monuments and architecture. The people actually live here now, and they're practicing, and their cultures are distinct. So residents in the mapping also said that we have really precious green spaces, and the green spaces have become spiritually important, and they help people heal. And land next to parks can be extremely valuable in the real estate market, but low-income people have a right to live next to them, not just rich condo owners. So residents mapped a lot of places in the neighborhood where they can volunteer. The Downtown Eastside has tons of places where residents can exercise their responsibilities as citizens and give back to society. If you ever need to defend the Downtown Eastside to counter the stereotypes that people are lazy bums and undeserving, mention the amount of volunteering that's done here. We should actually get a measurement of it, eh? So residents also mapped lots of free, cheap, and places that are nearby where they can get their necessities. And we all know welfare rates and minimum wages are abysmal, and we need a concentration of poor people together in order to have the types of services and services and stores that fit our budget. And this is so crucial for people who can't afford a bus and a car, right? So what will you do to get the province to increase the abysmal welfare rates? That's a key question. So residents mapped their favorite Downtown Eastside services. And actually residents started a lot of them themselves and operate them. We've scratched and scraped for these services, and we need them. And here's a quote from a mapper. "Harm reduction, convenience. Look how many places there are in such a small area, how fortunate we are." And here's another quote. "We feel safe in our own little groups because we sit around and talk like this. Pace, we love you for being here for us." Okay, so the next theme that we noticed in the mapping was that residents are attached to places that remind them of the good fights for social justice. It's part of our history. The building that you're sitting in here right now was slated to be a parking lot 25 years ago, and residents fought tooth and nail, Jean was one of them, to get this place. And it has an association, like we say now with the Carnegie Association, which has 6,000 members, that governs it. The crosses on this slide, somebody drew that about Oppenheimer Park. And those 1,000 crosses there by the baseball diamond, they represent in the 90s, the grief that the residents had in the neighborhood over the hundreds of overdoses that happened because of the view that drug users were monsters and didn't deserve help. Another thing that came up in the mapping, women constantly referenced the missing and murdered women, and even at one session we had, everybody broke down and cried when one woman said, actually the whole neighborhood is important, and I want to map the whole neighborhood in the name of the missing and murdered women. And during the 2010 Olympics, you might want to come to the Women's Memorial March on the 14th, because that happens regardless of the Olympics in this neighborhood every year, and I think it's like the 10th or 15th annual or whatever that's happening. Yeah. 19th. Okay.